In a quiet suburban neighborhood, nestled among tall oak trees and well-manicured lawns, an undercurrent of frustration was brewing within the community. This picturesque setting, coupled with the usual friendliness of neighbors, had been disrupted by an increasingly aggressive homeowners association, HOA. The HOA had long held the power to govern the community, set standards, and enforce rules, often with an iron fist that many residents found questionable. As a new homeowner, I initially welcomed the idea of having guidelines to preserve the aesthetic appeal of our neighborhood. However, what started as a desire for order turned into a source of constant anxiety. The board meetings began to feel more tyrannical than cooperative, with escalating bickering about trivial matters. Everything from paint colors to lawn heights had become fodder for heated discussions. Residents who spoke out against the board's more overreaching policies quickly learned that dissent was not to be tolerated. Tensions truly escalated when the HOA decided to crack down on supposed rule violators. Their approach was erratic, marked by spontaneous inspections and judgments that left homeowners feeling uneasy in their own spaces. One particular evening, after a particularly combative board meeting, I returned home to discover something that would send those tensions to a new high. Spike strips had been laid across my driveway. The sight was surreal. There they were, sharp, menacing strips that seemed to mock the very understanding we once had about property rights in our community. Instantly, my mind raced with questions. Who approved this? How could they think this was acceptable? It all felt heavy-handed and arbitrary. Taking a deep breath, I carefully maneuvered my vehicle around the dangerous obstacle before parking on the street, my heart racing with disbelief and anger. As I pondered my next steps, a flood of memories washed over me, conversations with other distressed homeowners who had faced similar confrontations. It was clear that we were all part of an unsettling paradigm shift in our once peaceful neighborhood. What began as minor disagreements over aesthetics now spiraled into serious violations, threatening not only our sense of community but also our safety. As I approached my home later that evening, the familiar sight of my driveway came into view, but a sudden wave of unease washed over me. Something was off. The evening light cast long shadows, and my heart sank as I saw the unmistakable glimmer of metal directly across the entrance to my driveway. My mind raced in disbelief, unsure of what to expect. Could it be some sort of prank? But no, there, stark and menacing, were spike strips laid out like guardrails of intimidation. They lined the gravel with an ominousness that immediately sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. The thought that someone had deliberately placed them there both shocked and confused me. I parked my car on the street, cautiously maneuvering around the hazardous strips while suppressing a surge of anger and embarrassment. I stepped out and approached the spikes, kneeling down to examine them closely. The sharp points glinted malevolently in the fading sunlight, and I felt a mix of disbelief and anger swirling within me. Who took it upon themselves to lay such a dangerous trap? My eyes darted around the neighborhood, half expecting to see someone watching from behind drawn curtains or peeking from behind their own driveways, reveling in my dismay. The weight of violation settled heavily on my shoulders. It wasn't just about the physical danger created by the spike strips but also the psychological warfare they represented. This was not merely a misstep in HOA governance, it felt like a declaration of war against anyone who dared challenge their authority. My confidence ebbed away with each passing moment as I pondered how things had devolved to this level. I considered whether I should remove the strips myself, but what if someone got hurt in the process? Should I document this reckless action instead? Anxiety gnawed at me as I reached for my phone to take photographs, intent on capturing evidence should this escalate into something more serious. News of a potential violation spread like wildfire through our community. This would not end here. Part of me wished for an immediate confrontation with whoever was responsible, while another part screamed for caution. We were already walking on thin ice within the HOA's jurisdictional fog. As anger simmered beneath the surface, one thought remained clear: this marked a concerning tipping point that could redefine our neighborhood's character forever. Understanding the role of the Homeowners Association, HOA, is essential in navigating the complexities of living in a community governed by such an entity. Generally, an HOA is established to maintain property values and ensure that neighborhoods adhere to certain aesthetic and functional standards. They are responsible for managing common areas, enforcing community rules, collecting dues, and mediating disputes among residents. Initially, these goals sound appealing. After all, a well-maintained neighborhood benefits everyone. However, the powers vested in an HOA can sometimes lead to overreach. What starts as a collective effort to preserve community integrity can devolve into a heavy-handed enforcement of rules that many residents find intrusive or unreasonable. The authority of an HOA is typically outlined in governing documents such as covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC and RS, which residents agree to follow upon moving in. These documents are meant to clarify what is permitted and what is not within the neighborhood. But when the HOA begins taking drastic measures, such as placing spike strips across driveways, it crosses a line into territory that raises serious concerns about legality and ethics. Spike strips are not only dangerous but can also be viewed as a form of intimidation aimed at silencing dissenters. Their placement on my driveway felt less like protection or governance and more like vigilantism disguised as rule enforcement. In discerning where the HOA overstepped its boundaries, it becomes clear that their authority does not include endangering residents or their property. Actions like these may violate local laws regarding property safety and personal rights. It's crucial for homeowners to remember that any governing body should serve its community rather than instill fear or create hostility among neighbors. While HOAs are entrusted with significant power, they must exercise it responsibly and fairly. The spike strips on my driveway represent a chilling example of when this authority goes unchecked. Instead of fostering community spirit, such actions threaten to alienate residents while creating an atmosphere of fear rather than one of cooperation. As tensions rise further within our neighborhood, it raises important questions about how we can reclaim our sense of safety and ensure that our rights as homeowners are respected moving forward. The installation of spike strips presents serious legal implications, especially when considering the safety and well-being of residents. These devices are typically used in law enforcement to immobilize vehicles but have no place in a residential neighborhood. The moment they were laid across my driveway, they transformed from a mere nuisance to a dangerous obstruction, violating not only common sense but potentially local laws as well. In most jurisdictions, property owners are responsible for maintaining safe access to and from their properties. The placement of spike strips could easily be construed as creating an unsafe environment, which is in direct violation of local ordinances regarding property safety and the duty to avoid causing harm to others. Many states have laws governing hazardous conditions on private property. If someone were to be injured as a result of these spikes, the liability would likely fall squarely on the HOA and its members. Moreover, there are implications under tort law concerning negligence. If the HOA knowingly placed these spikes with disregard for safety, they could be liable for any damages or injuries sustained by residents or visitors. Legal precedents exist that hold property owners accountable for unsafe conditions, suggesting that the HOA's actions may not only be unethical but also actionable in court. Additionally, depending on local regulations, the HOA may have violated zoning laws by installing such an intrusive device without proper permits or community consensus. These regulations often require that any structural changes or installations affecting common areas or private properties need to adhere to safety standards designed to protect residents. Given the potential legal ramifications, it becomes increasingly clear that the HOA's decision was reckless and possibly illegal. Residents have every right to feel outraged. Not only were their personal safety and peace of mind compromised, but they also faced the possibility of legal entanglements resulting from these hazardous actions. As I navigated this crisis, it became crucial for me, and other concerned homeowners, to gather evidence and consider consulting with legal counsel. Understanding our rights would not only empower us individually but also enable us to stand united against an overreaching HOA determined to enforce its will through intimidation rather than collaboration. The stakes were high, our safety was on the line, and it was time for residents to reclaim control over their community's governance. The moment I laid eyes on the spike strips, disbelief washed over me like a cold wave. How could this happen in our neighborhood? My mind raced as I grappled with the absurdity of it all. These strips were not merely a misguided attempt at enforcing HOA rules but rather a reckless act that jeopardized the safety of everyone. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, fueled by the realization that this was more than just a nuisance, it represented a significant violation of trust. Instinctively, I knew I had to act quickly. The thought of anyone getting hurt on those spikes was unbearable. I grabbed my phone, capturing images for documentation, but my immediate focus shifted to removing the dangerous obstructions from my driveway. As I approached the strips, a mix of fury and determination coursed through me. I couldn't allow this blatant intimidation tactic to remain unchallenged. With each careful move, I reached down and began to pull the spike strips away. The sharp points gleamed under the dim light, an unsettling reminder of how easily they could injure someone. I felt as though I was fighting against an unseen enemy, one that had overstepped its bounds in an effort to exert control over my life. The labor of lifting those strips off my property felt like reclaiming not just my driveway but my sense of safety and belonging in the community. As I worked, memories flooded back to previous HOA meetings where disputes had simmered beneath polite facades. The board members' self-righteousness and dismissive attitudes about residents' concerns clanged loudly in my ears now, making this moment even more infuriating. It was hard not to feel that this act was personal, a direct challenge to anyone who resisted their authority. Once I finished clearing the driveway, I stood back to assess what had transpired. It was more than just a physical removal of spikes, it symbolized defiance against coercion and intimidation tactics that sought to silence dissenting voices. A sense of empowerment surged through me as I realized that this situation could not be ignored or swept under the rug. Now faced with the next steps, the prospect of confronting the HOA and rallying other residents, I knew that our community needed to stand together. This incident marked a pivotal point not only for me but potentially for all homeowners who had suffered quietly under the pressure of an overreaching association. The stakes were high. It was time for us to reclaim our neighborhood on our own terms. After removing the spike strips, I knew it was crucial to communicate with the HOA to seek answers and propose a resolution. Fueled by a mixture of determination and trepidation, I drafted an email outlining my concerns about the spike strips, their dangerous implications, and how they violated community safety standards. In the message, I requested clarification on who authorized this reckless action and urged the board to reconsider their approach to enforcing rules. I expected some acknowledgement or at least a formal response, but what I received instead felt dismissive and vague. The HOA's reply seemed more like a generic template than a genuine attempt to address my concerns. They mentioned that the spikes were part of a safety initiative aimed at deterring unauthorized vehicles from occupying driveways, an explanation that did little to quell my anger. It felt as if they were doubling down on their actions rather than admitting any fault. In light of this lackluster response, I knew I needed to escalate my efforts. I arranged to attend the next HOA meeting, where residents would have an opportunity to voice their grievances openly. To prepare, I reached out to neighbors who had also expressed dissatisfaction with the HOA's tactics in past meetings. Many were eager to join forces. As we gathered our thoughts and evidence, photos of the spike strips alongside accounts of previous disputes, it became apparent that this was not just about me, it was about all of us reclaiming our rights. At the meeting, tensions were palpable. When it was finally time for public comments, we presented our case collectively. My heart raced as we shared our stories of intimidation and fear stemming from the HOA's overreaching authority. However, despite our united front, some board members remained defensive and even dismissive of our concerns. They implied that we were misinterpreting their intentions and insisted that their actions were for the greater good. Still, throughout this confrontation, there was newfound strength among us residents. We realized that together we had become a force for change within our community, a collective voice demanding accountability from those who governed us. While frustrations lingered after the meeting ended, one thing became clear: it was imperative for us to maintain open lines of communication among ourselves and continue pushing back against unreasonable actions taken by a governing body meant to serve us. The process ahead would be daunting. However, this experience ignited an unwavering resolve in me, and in others, to fight for transparency and fairness within our neighborhood governance. We would no longer allow fear tactics to dictate our community's atmosphere or silence dissenting voices. Tensions reached a boiling point one evening when the Homeowners Association, HOA, decided to call law enforcement regarding the spike strips. After being confronted by myself and a group of concerned residents at a recent HOA meeting, where we voiced our collective outrage, they had asserted that the spikes were necessary for community safety. Their defiance was alarming, but I hadn't anticipated that they would escalate the situation to involving the police. The arrival of the police was swift, with 2 officers pulling up in a squad car, their expressions unreadable as they stepped out. I could feel a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Were they here to side with the HOA or investigate the unauthorized and hazardous installation? As the officers approached, I instinctively took a deep breath, preparing to explain our side. One of the HOA board members quickly took charge of the situation, trying to present their rationale for placing the spike strips as a protective measure. This feigned concern for safety felt grossly hypocritical given the danger those strips posed. They claimed unauthorized vehicles had been an issue in our neighborhood, suggesting that the spikes were meant to deter such behavior. It was hard not to roll my eyes. Their solution was more harmful than the problem they purported to solve. As I spoke with the officers, explaining how these spikes represented not only a physical threat but also an infringement on our rights as homeowners, I noticed their demeanor shift. The police began to understand that this wasn't a simple case of rule enforcement, it was an abuse of power that had sparked genuine fear among residents. After some back-and-forth discussion, the officers took a moment to survey the scene. They inspected the spikes closely and listened attentively as I articulated my concerns about safety violations and potential liability issues the HOA might face. The officers then turned their attention back to the HOA representatives, clearly puzzled by their justification for such extreme measures. Eventually, the police issued a warning to the HOA about the potential legal ramifications of their actions and advised them to remove the spike strips immediately. It felt surreal to witness the authority of law enforcement validate our concerns, providing an unexpected sense of relief. As tensions dissolved somewhat with law enforcement's involvement, it became clear that we weren't just fighting against an aggressive HOA but also standing up for the integrity and safety of our community. With each development, I felt a renewed determination bubbling within me and my neighbors. We now had an ally in our struggle against intimidation tactics, reminding us that we weren't alone in this fight for justice and accountability in our neighborhood. The community's response to the spike strips incident was a mix of support, confusion, and outrage, reflecting the varied perspectives within our once unified neighborhood. In the days following the confrontation with the HOA and the police, I noticed an increasing number of residents gathering in informal discussions, sharing their thoughts and experiences regarding the escalating tensions. It was clear that many felt uneasy about the HOA's heavy-handed tactics, yet not everyone was aligned with our growing resistance. Some neighbors expressed support for the HOA, arguing that measures were necessary to ensure property values remained intact. They cited past instances of abandoned vehicles and noise complaints as justification for stricter enforcement. While I understood their concerns, it felt frustrating to hear them overlook the dangers posed by the spike strips and the violation of our rights as homeowners. It highlighted a divide in our community. Some preferred adherence to order over acknowledging the harmful implications of those drastic measures. Conversely, for every neighbor who supported the HOA, there seemed to be another who stood firmly against its actions. Many shared stories similar to mine, experiences of intimidation or frustration during board meetings where their voices felt unheard. As I spoke with these supportive neighbors, we found common ground in our desire for transparency and accountability from our governing body. There was a growing realization that we were not isolated in this fight, rather, we represented a collective desire for change. As word spread about our pushback against the HOA, several residents reached out to express solidarity. They began attending meetings alongside us and would often share additional evidence of overreach they had witnessed, be it unnecessary fines or arbitrary rule enforcement. The momentum began to build. It felt empowering to see once silent neighbors take a stand together. However, not everyone was willing to confront the HOA directly. Some residents expressed fear of backlash or retribution, not wanting to become targets themselves, and chose to remain on the sidelines. This apprehension was palpable and served as a reminder of how power dynamics can stifle voices in a community setting. Despite these divisions, our collective actions sparked a renewed sense of engagement among residents who had previously been apathetic about HOA governance. Conversations shifted from mere complaints to potential solutions, ideas for better communication channels with the HOA and community-led initiatives aimed at fostering collaboration rather than confrontation. Ultimately, while opinions differed on how best to address the situation, one thing became clear: the conflict created an opportunity for meaningful dialogue within our neighborhood, challenging us all to rethink how decisions were made and who truly held authority over our community's future. This strengthened our resolve not just to claim our rights but also to redefine what it meant to live together harmoniously in our suburban enclave. In the aftermath of the spike strips incident, our neighborhood underwent a significant transformation. What began as a crisis sparked by an aggressive HOA action evolved into an opportunity for growth, learning, and community empowerment. The confrontation with the HOA and the ensuing discussions among residents illuminated several key lessons about governance, communication, and the importance of personal property rights. Firstly, it became evident that open communication is vital in any community. Many residents had previously felt isolated or powerless to voice their concerns, but the spike strips incident acted as a catalyst, encouraging dialogue. Through collective conversations, we learned that many felt similarly intimidated by the HOA's tactics, which had dissuaded them from speaking out in the past. This highlighted the importance of fostering an environment where all members feel heard and valued. Secondly, we recognized the critical role of understanding our rights as homeowners. Armed with knowledge about legal frameworks and HOA governance, residents became more confident in standing up against overreach. This collective education empowered us to challenge unjust practices and demand accountability from those in positions of power. We developed a greater appreciation for our rights not only as property owners but also as active participants in our community's governance. Additionally, the experience taught us about the need for checks and balances within the HOA structure itself. Residents began advocating for clearer guidelines on rule enforcement and a more equitable approach to community management. We proposed initiatives such as regular town hall meetings and increased transparency regarding HOA decisions, ensuring that all voices would be included in future discussions. As tensions eased and dialogue flourished, we noticed a shift toward collaboration rather than confrontation within our neighborhood. Residents who had previously been disengaged began attending meetings regularly and actively participating in community initiatives. The sense of unity grew stronger as we worked together to create a neighborhood where everyone could feel safe and respected. Reflecting on the events surrounding the spike strips, I realized that this conflict ultimately served as a reminder of the power of community. It underscored that through solidarity and proactive engagement, we could reclaim our rights and reshape our living environment into one built on trust, fairness, and cooperation. As we moved forward, it became clear that while challenges may arise again in the future, we now possess the tools to face them head-on. The lessons learned through this ordeal fortified our resolve to ensure that our community remains a safe haven for all its residents, one that values open dialogue and mutual respect over fear and intimidation. As we reflect on the transformative journey our community has taken following the Spike Strips incident, it's crucial to consider how such experiences can resonate beyond our own neighborhood. Many homeowners across the country engage with homeowners associations, HOAs, and while these organizations can provide structure and maintain property values, they also hold significant power that can lead to overreach. Now is the time for each of us to examine our relationships with our local HOAs and advocate for systems that ensure accountability and protect homeowner rights. If you have ever felt intimidated by your HOA or found yourself questioning their decisions, know that you are not alone. Incidents like ours serve as reminders of the importance of standing up against unjust practices. It's essential to encourage open conversations among neighbors about their experiences and concerns regarding HOA governance. Share your stories. You might find that others have faced similar challenges or have valuable insights to offer. Moreover, advocating for legal frameworks that protect homeowners is critical. Local governments can institute regulations that safeguard residents from punitive measures taken by HOAs without proper oversight. For example, laws could mandate clear communication protocols between HOAs and homeowners or require regular reviews of HOA rules to ensure they remain fair and just. We must also push for amicable solutions within our communities. Rather than allowing conflicts to escalate into crises, proactive engagement in discussions can foster collaboration over confrontation. By promoting dialogue between residents and HOA board members, through town halls, open forums, or informal meetups, we can create an atmosphere where voices are heard and considered. As homeowners, we must remember that we have rights, ranging from personal property rights to a say in the governance structures that impact our daily lives. By asserting these rights respectfully yet firmly, we set a precedent for future interactions with our HOAs. Encourage neighbors to get involved in their communities by participating in HOA meetings or joining committees where they can influence decision-making processes. In closing, let's harness the lessons learned from our ordeal not just for personal empowerment but as a collective call to action. Advocate for transparency, accountability, and fairness within your community's governance structures. Together, let's work toward a future where HOAs function harmoniously with residents, one where trust replaces intimidation and where every homeowner feels secure in their rights and responsibilities. The strength of a community lies in its unity. Let's ensure our neighborhoods thrive through cooperation and respect for one another's voices.